Recently, I wrote a book, or I assembled from existing papers a book called Still No Trace of an Aryan Invasion. That title was suggested to me by my summary of a lecture that I attended by a British archaeologist called Cameron Petrie. And now what follows is my own interpretation of what he says. I don't want you to consider him the authority behind which I try to hide or something. This is very much my own opinion. But the talk he gave about archaeological evidence found in the Harappan sites showed that there was no need for him to bring in an Aryan invasion. And when pointedly asked several times, both by the audience and by the chairman, whether there was any invasion for the Aryan question, for the supposed Aryan invasion, he couldn't mention any. And he said that the question is so complicated that in fact we may never know. And that, of course, is the opinion of many scholars in the West. In India, sometimes people think that there is some big Western conspiracy to inflict the Aryan Invasion Theory on India. That is not true. You see, most scholars in the field in the West have a resigned attitude, like, we don't know, we may never know. It's an old question, it's an old story. It's quaint. Today nobody cares about questions of origin anymore, like they used to do. So most people just don't want to get into this discussion. And those who do mostly are just attached to whatever they have learned. You know, very few people have an ideological motive to push the Aryan invasion nowadays. But they do have often a personal motive. They have invested so much of their career in working within the paradigm of an Aryan invasion that now, you see, they would sacrifice a lot of their own work if they accept a different scenario. But so this archaeologist from Britain actually confirmed what most archaeologists here in India already say and have been saying for some time, that there is simply no evidence at all for anything like an Aryan invasion. A few years ago, I was at an archaeologists' conference in Delhi, and every single speaker reporting from one or other excavation site belonging to the Harappan civilization came to say, yes, you see, we found this and this development and that. And it's all due to internal factors. We have never ever come across anything necessitated by a foreign intervention, by an invasion or an immigration, whatever you call it. So one after another, they were saying, no, there is no proof at all for an Aryan invasion. Just at that time, I received an email from an American scholar with whom I was having an argument for some time over the Aryan invasion question. And he said, but you see, Koenraad, don't you understand that, you know, yours is a completely marginal position and nobody accepts the idea that Indian civilization is fully indigenous, let alone that there was an out of India movement. You see, the Aryan invasion is the only game in town. That, you see, I received exactly at the moment when all the scholars around me were saying just the opposite. Next to me was sitting Professor B.B. Lal, the Dean of Indian Archaeology. And he, in the 50s, as a young archaeologist, had made his name by identifying the painted grey ware with the Aryans moving deeper into India. And that finding is cited till today as proof of the Aryan invasion. In reality, it's like 50 years ago that B.B. Lal repudiated his own finding. He says, well, you see, I was mesmerized by the omnipresent Aryan invasion assumption, so I tried to fit my own findings into that scenario. But in fact, there is no proof at all that these were the Aryan invaders. And with my findings by now, I totally reject the idea of an Aryan invasion. In my opinion, Vedic culture was not the product of an invasion. On the contrary, it is simply the same thing as Harappan civilization. They are two sides of the same coin. So there is no evidence for an Aryan invasion, and in fact that is admitted by some of the most vocal invasionists. Like Michael Witzel has written in so many words that there is no archaeological proof as yet. So he still keeps hoping that some proof will be found. Well, it hasn't materialized yet. Recently in India, some people who support the Aryan invasion for political motives, Dravidianists, Ambedkarites, Christian missionaries, secularists, all those who have an interest in belittling Hindu civilization, now draw a lot of hope from news that genetic developments prove that there has been some influx from Central Asia into the Indian population. Now, to say genetics has proven the Aryan invasion means that you really don't know what the debate is about. You see, if you say that, what you have to do is to just go back to the school benches and learn. Learn the ABC, learn from the beginning what this debate is about. Because clearly you don't know. You see, there is a big difference between language and material people. The two are not the same. If, to name some human artifact similar to language, if Buddhism has spread from India to China, to Japan, to Indonesia, and so on, are there any genes that show this movement? Are there Buddhist genes that are present in China that originally were not present in China, that only were brought to China from India? Well, I think not. And so language changes a bit more slowly than religion. People more easily adapt a new religion than that they adopt a new language. But still, it's essentially the same. And people do adopt new languages. In fact, throughout history, people have been doing it. Often, the speakers of a language themselves caused the death of a language because they found in certain sociological circumstances that the language did not have much of a future. So in order to make the chances of their children better, they immediately taught their children from childhood onwards the language of the conquerors, the language of the dominant group, so that, you see, they would be favored in the competition of society. And so something may have happened here along the same lines. Effectively, the Indian population, it seems, shows 17% genes that come from Central Asia. I am not very sure how they can decide this, but let's accept this 17%, there's no problem with it. We already know from Indian history, from the last 3,000 years, that there have been plenty of immigrations into India. We have had the Huns, the Scythians, the Kushanas, the Greeks. We've had refugee groups like the Syrian Christians, the Jews, the Parsis. Then we've had military invasions by the Turks, the Afghans, even bringing in some Ethiopian slave soldiers. They all settled in India. They all make up these 17%, yet none of them maintained his language, let alone imposed his language on the natives. So to accept that, you see, genes point out that there was some influx, well, yes, there's no problem. That doesn't say anything at all about a language being brought in. And so there too, there is simply no evidence for a foreign Aryan, or whatever you call it, language being brought into India. So there is simply no evidence yet for this Aryan invasion. Not even linguistic. You see, some people think that there is linguistic evidence. In fact, my own professor of Indo-European linguistics long ago said that actually there is no linguistic evidence for the Aryan invasion. But he thought archaeologists have proven it. When we have just seen that archaeologists have proven no such thing. But many archaeologists are still fearful to draw the logical conclusions because they are under the impression that, oh, but the linguists have proven it. You see, there's always someone else who has proven it. But frankly, I've never seen this proof. So it is very safe to say, no, there is still no proof of an Aryan invasion. Thank you.